undefendable position. You know, like everyone has some kind of root assumptions that you make that you try to filter everything else through. So tell me exactly, objectively, why I should do what God says as opposed to doing what God, or not doing what God says to do. Can you objectively, or I don't know, normatively, or whatever the word is, explain that, please?
Well, it's kind of hard to answer your question because there are obviously different types of reasons. For instance, if you're asking for a moral reason to do what God says, then it's kind of hard to answer that question because, I mean, it's like asking for a moral reason to be moral. If you try to do that, then you'd be committing circular reasoning. Now, I could give you a rational reason to do what God says, and that is simply your moral experience. Your moral experience tells you, I think it's safe to assume that when you hear of things like the Holocaust, or when you hear of things like the possibility of somebody running people over just for the hell of it, you know that that is wrong, and therefore you should believe that you also should not do that. And the argument from facts of normativity seeks to explain why that exists, not how we know that exists, but why it exists. Why does morality exist? And because of the prescriptiveness, and because it's normative, it seems to show that there is a consciousness behind these moral facts.
Is that good for you, Rabbit Ape?
Yeah. I guess just a little bit of a follow-up here, and yeah, maybe we're kind of misunderstanding each other, and I've been drinking, so my attention span isn't quite what it could be. But I guess no matter how you want to break it down, I think it's immoral to go around randomly killing people because, in my own mind, I just think that impinging on the freedoms of another sentient being is a bad thing, and for me, it's kind of okay that I just take that for granted, and I don't presume to think that I can justify that, and I don't think I have to. I don't know. Yeah, no further questions, I guess. I don't know if any of that makes sense at all.
May, did you want to respond to that, or is that everything you have to say?
Yeah, I've said everything I want to say in response to Rabbit Ape's question.
Okay, if you could pick some... who wants to ask a question? Mig, pick someone else, and Smartmouth, as soon as he makes his decision, you can leave Doc, if you don't mind, and then that person can go in. If anyone else goes in, somebody kick them. Wildcard, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Don't worry about that.
Okay, I'll just have to be completely random. How about Graphite? Unless Wildcard wants to ask a question.
Okay, Smartmouth, you can go, and Graphite can come in, and Wildcard, if you'd like, you can ask a question after Graphite.
You guys hear me?
Nope, totally.
Alrighty. My question's for Honest Discussioner. You said that Jesus or God could have come and done something to change the mind of somebody somewhere on earth to get them to come into a relationship with him. My question for you is, how do you know that by doing so, that wouldn't cause more people to not believe or have a love relationship with him? Isn't it speculation to say that one thing would happen without saying that the other thing isn't equally possible to happen?
Before I begin, please mute your mic. Thank you. That's an excellent point. I have to admit that is a very excellent point. However, we're talking about a being of sheer omnipotence here. At least that's what's posited in this conversation is sheer omnipotence. At the very least, I would say to argue that this less than 50% margin is the best that God could do, I think I excuse the harsh language because I can't think of a better word at the moment, but slightly ridiculous. I would have to say that given the infinite number of possibilities, the fact that God has set up this universe the way he wanted it to be, set up our souls, he created, I'm assuming that you're a theist given your question. If I'm wrong, then please forgive me. But according to your religion, the entity inside of you, which you think is you, your soul, was formed by him. It, she, whatever. Could that entity, this God that you posit, have created your soul in any different way than it was created? You have to think about what is the soul. Is it a carbon copy? Is the soul just free will, the ability to make decisions? Or is it an individual entity separate from that of all others? Is King Heathen's soul different from mine and yours and Mig's and Rabid apes? I'm just mentioning the people on Doc because that's the people I can see. Are those souls different? If you're going to argue that they are different, that they can be made in some sort of different way, beyond our ability to understand methodology, I'll admit. But if you're going to state that is the case, that God forms them, and there's some sort of metaphysical methodology to this, then they could have been made in different ways, and that God made you to literally do exactly what you were going to do. The ability of God, I mentioned earlier, God is a perfect being, and a perfect being cannot do anything beyond what it really wants. If it wants something to happen a certain way, whether through literal forcing or manipulation, then that is what will happen. A perfect being cannot create something that is once perfect and then descends from perfection, because if it descends from perfection, it wasn't perfect, because it was liable to become imperfect, which is not perfection. I would argue that perfection is the opposite of that. That is the very essence of my free will argument, is that God created us. He created the universe. He created everything. You can't say that someone who creates all of the rules and all of the characters and everything involved in the world, and yet they're not responsible for the outcome of that world. It would be to argue that Agatha Christie's characters had free will. Because it's not quite as so, but still, she created everything in that universe. She created the personality. She created everything about that person. And to argue that we have free will under such a situation, I find, is a ridiculous claim. And I don't mean ridiculous in the derogatory fashion. I'm not trying to put you down. I find that logic does not comport with reality. If I was at any of the aspects of God, without forcing someone, without literally changing who and what they are, I could get them to do anything. If I was omniscient, with just my body, anything that I touched, I would be able to. Anything that I did, I immediately would know what the repercussions of that would be throughout time. So to argue that this is the best reality, that this, less than 50% of people going to heaven, is the best possible reality that an omniscient being can create, I think is quite ridiculous. And I think it's wild. Please stay on dock and don't leave until we're ready. Wild card and then King Heathen.